I got the official title. This is a bit of a disclaimer before we begin. Like Rabbi Lent, like Rabbi Lowenthal, like the other rabbis here, I'm just a regular rabbi, help people with prayers, teach the Torah, do what we do. I stumbled upon, of course, no such thing as stumbling upon something, but I knocked on a door. This was maybe 15 years ago. An elderly Jewish gentleman lived there by the name of Mofex. And I was a young Chabad rabbi. I wanted to do the tefillin prayer with him. He was smoking a pipe in one hand. He had classical music playing in the back. He's an old-time pickle maker. From Boyle Heights here in California, there's this old factory. He's retired, of course, at that time. I say, Mo, you want to do a mitzvah, put on tefillin? This is before the pandemic. I used to go to people's houses. We put on the tefillin, and then he says, Shmuley, you like a nice kosher pickle? I said, of course. We grew up sauerkraut, olives, half sour, full sour. This is, of course. We go to the side of his house. He's got an open barrel, puts his Yiddish hand in there, pulls out the best pickle I ever had. We did the blessing. Long story short, as my community grew, I didn't have time to do prayers with him, but I had time to come over and get a pickle. So I'd come over and get a pickle. He was a big Macallan drinker, for those who are familiar with Macallan. He tells me, Shmuley, you should teach at your Hebrew school, teach them how to make kosher pickles. I said, okay. So the problem was, he don't have a recipe. He has shisarain, okay? That's Yiddish for throw it in. So how much garlic? I don't know, you shisarain. So it's hard to work with someone like that, okay? I know if someone gives you a recipe to make challah, they say, give me a handful. Long story short, we have kosher pickle making the first time 15 years ago at my little Hebrew school. The parents would not believe. I've never seen this before. I said, hey, what's going on? They said, we want to learn how to make kosher pickles. I said, all right, come back Tuesday night. Tuesday night, this place was packed. We can't get a minyan on Yom Kippur. That's how small this town is. But we filled the house for kosher pickles. So I realized there's some koyach, there's some strength in kosher pickles. What is it? That's what I spent 10,000 hours on, looking through the Talmud, looking through Hasidic literature, looking through all of the Jewish literature about pickling. What is it? What is pickling and why are we fascinated by it? So I'm not sure. I'm just going to scroll here for a second. Let me see if we have any youngsters. I see Rabbi Lent is on. Beautiful bookcase behind him. That is wonderful. I'm sure he's read every single one of those books. I know him personally. I can vouch for it. So listen.
Rabbi Shmuley, I just need to interrupt because I missed an entire community. We have Rabbi and Rebbetzin Feldman and the Jewish community in Iceland. So special guests.
I can tell you, I've done a few of these already. This by far has the most communities. It's such a unity. This Zoom itself, we could end it now. Just bringing all these people together itself is such a mitzvah, such a wonderful thing, that it should be a blessing for all the communities there and here and around the world. Amen. Okay, back to pickle making. I was told to speak slowly, so I will. I listen to rabbis. This here is a Persian cucumber. I don't know what they call them in Europe. It's the skinny ones, not the Kirby's. We're going to be using a Persian cucumber. Why? Because Mo said it has a higher chance of success. It's got less water. So we're going to go with the safe bet, the Persian cucumber. So if I were to leave this, In California today, it's about 72. We're in Orange County, California. If I left these out on my counter for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 months, let's say, what would it look like? It would turn into mush. Bacteria would start getting to it. It doesn't last. Kosher salt here. If I had this box of kosher salt in my trunk for 2 months or in my garage, be fine. This actually was in my garage for about 2 months. It's fine. Nothing happens to salt. Salt stays good forever. Aha. So what is it about cucumbers somehow don't last? We need to pickle our vegetables. Before refrigeration, I think it was Napoleon, he offered big money. Who could figure out how to preserve vegetables on the battlefield, because they didn't have Starbucks, Walmart, whatever stores you have there. They didn't have them on the battlefield. Or when Columbus took his huge yacht around, they didn't have refrigeration. They needed to figure out how to preserve their food. Now, preservation is important. Is there something you would like to preserve? Is there a nation that somehow has persevered, has preserved our heritage throughout thousands of years? Other nations cannot. What is it about the Jewish people? What is it? Also, sometimes when I do with teens, I say, put in the chat something you would like to preserve. Your sanity. People say their happiness. Relationships is a big one. There are things, wealth, of course. There's things we would like to preserve. That's not a new idea. The Talmud actually talks about it. People who wanted to preserve their wealth, the Talmud tells them to salt their money. What? Yes. Somehow they figured out that when you take a cucumber or watermelon or beets, whatever you like, and you put it into a salt brine, it prevents the natural bacteria from destroying the cucumber, and boom, you preserve the cucumber. Mazel tov. What is it? What is the salty brine that spiritually can preserve our happiness? You know, there's natural bacteria, as I call them, spiritual bacteria like jealousy. We're coming up now to the holiday of Purim. Everyone's familiar with this holiday. Purim has an evil character by the name of Haman. Boo! Haman is a great-grandson of Amalek. This is the nation that first attacked the Jews. So we go way back. The Jews and this Amalek. What is this Amalek? So if you speak Hebrew, I'll tell it to you. We just read it. Asher korcha baderech, they attacked you on the road. But in Hebrew, korcha also means they cooled you off. Aha. Relationships, sometimes they cool off. That's for another show, another rabbi. I don't deal with romantic problems. There's issues in our own spiritual life. We wake up, we want to be the best Jew ever. We want to study the whole Torah. We want to go to all the rabbis' classes. We want to make challah. That's great. Then we have this cooling period, this Amalekness, this Haman issue, this natural bacteria that happens that I call the Haman against the pickle. How do we preserve ourselves from this evil natural occurrence? To cool off, you burn out. I don't know if Europe has it. The US, we have the highest rate of burnout. You know, how do you preserve your passion for Torah? That's what I looked up. So I will tell you that, and then we'll start making pickles. Let me pull it up, because this is actually very important. Rabbi Lent, you still following? You're okay? I'm speaking too fast?
Fantastic.
Okay. I'm going to pull up here a book. This is by the founder of Chabad, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. Wrote in about 1797, 1777, around there. I was very young, hard for me to remember. In the Tanya, he says that when you talk about kosher, right, kosher pickles, It's not just this is what you're allowed to eat, this is what you're not allowed to eat. He uses the Hebrew, and if you speak Hebrew, it's just beautiful. So I'll teach it to you. In Hebrew, you know how you say something that's forbidden? Asur, or in Yiddish, osur. It's prohibited, that's it, you cannot eat it. Pork, asur, or an activity. The word for permissible foods, mutar, or mutr. Untied is another way of saying this. In Hebrew, tied down is asur, so forbidden and tied down, same word. And mutar, permissible and untied, same word. So he says this is a message for us. Kosher, we live a kosher lifestyle, is like this. Our purpose, the purpose of me and you, is to uplift. You have a nice home, you turn it into a Jewish home. You have a nice dinner, you turn it into energy to be a better parent, to be a neighbor, to be able to study Torah, to uplift the physical world. Now, there's certain things that are tied down. Nothing to do here, you're wasting your time, move on. Then there's certain things that are untied. They're permissible, they're right there for us to uplift. And we kosherize it, so to speak, in the process. So our job is to kind of kosherize our environment around us. And when we make pickles, which we'll do now, we're going to go step by step, the actual way of making pickles. And at the same time, we'll figure out how to uplift the world around us. So here we go. We're ready to start. Number one, I'm just going to take a breather to slow down. Okay. Am I speaking too fast? Rabbi Lent, should I use Yiddish? Should we go into completely Yiddish?
Oh, I thought you were speaking Yiddish until now.
No, this is American English.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Does everybody have an empty vessel? We're going to need empty vessel. We're going to need kosher salt. We'll get into why it's called kosher in a minute. We're going to need pickling spice. This is mostly coriander, peppercorns, got mustard seed. You're going to need, of course, 2 cups of water. I'm not doing it in the exact order. The Glenlivet is here as part of the show to explain how things take sometimes 15 years, but we'll get to that in a minute. And then, of course, we're going to need our chesnok, our garlic, knobel, and then we're going to need our fresh dill, aromatic dill. Give us schmeck. Fantastic. Okay. And then, of course, a few of our Persian cubes to pickle. All right, we're ready to start. There's 5 steps to making kosher pickles. And when I discovered these 5 steps, it's actually from the Rebbe. I have it here in the bookcase. Rabbi Lent has his bookcase behind him. I have my bookcase in front of me. So we're still friends. The ethics of the fathers, Pirkei Avot, starts with ethics. No, it doesn't. No, it starts with Moses, got the Torah at Mount Sinai, gave it to Joshua. Joshua gave it to the elders. So the Rebbe asks, why this little crash course in Jewish history when you're talking about ethics? So the Rebbe says, it's not a crash course in Jewish history. It's the secret to be a student of the Torah. There's 5 steps. I realized these 5 steps are the 5 steps to being a rabbi, the 5 steps to being married, the 5 steps to running a business, and the 5 steps to making kosher pickles. What are they? I know you want to know. Number 1, Moses. Moses represents humility. So the foundation of being a parent, being a rabbi, humility. Okay. Number 2, Joshua. He was the first one at the tent, the last one to leave. He was the first one on the Zoom, the last one to leave the Zoom. He represents consistency, persistence. That's number 2. Number 3, the elders. Common sense. Number 4, the prophets. The elders gave it to the prophet. The prophets, this represents spirituality. What's the backstory? Why does Haman hate Mordechai? And why was it Mordechai who could take down the Haman? What's their backstory? Okay, a little spirituality. Why does salt preserve other things? What is it about salt? Where does it come from? I know physically how it works. You talk to a scientist, but spiritually, why is salt found in the ocean? Why do we dip challah in salt? What's going on with salt? We'll get to that. That's the spirituality of it. Number 4, the prophets. Number 5, men of the great assembly. The prophets gave it to the men of the great assembly, the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah. They basically, kind of like today, they lived at the time of the destruction of the temple. So Judaism kind of shifted from being temple-centric to prayers, synagogues, Havdalah, Kiddush. The Judaism we have today, the adaptability of a Jew in exile, that is the 5th step. So number 1, just to review, because this is very important, humility, persistence, common sense, spirituality, and adaptability. So we're going to start with an empty vessel, humility, ready to accept. Because you're saying, I know how to make pickles. My grandmother made pickles in the basement with bread. I know. But in order to be a student, you need to be open to it. So we're going to start with an empty vessel and 2 cups water. I will pour it in slowly. We're starting now to make the pickles. Here we go. Slowly pouring it in for effect. Yeah. You can use any 32-ounce container. Should be fine. And I'm just looking through here to see who else is joining and making pickles as we go. Yeah, we'll get to the month of Adar. I see some people have their grogger behind them. Very nice. Getting ready. Okay, number 2, we have the star of the show, Kosher Salt. All right, let's bring him out. Kosher Salt, all salt is kosher. So why is kosher salt called kosher salt? Because it's used to kosherize. You see how thick these and coarse these things are? Look how coarse these kernels are. They are used to kosherize beef. The Jews are not allowed to drink blood from an animal. It's gross. They thought at the times of the Torah, 4,500 years ago, instead of going to a doctor, instead of going to the gym, instead of working out, you go over to an ox or a shark and you just drink the blood and you get really ripped. But it's not true. It's gross. It's disgusting. So the Torah says Jews are not allowed to drink blood. Asur, tie down, nothing to do here. Now, when we slaughter an animal and we're going to eat the beef, we need to salt it. So they lay a layer of salt, which is thick. It absorbs the moisture in about 10, 15 minutes. Then they wash it off. Boom! Now the meat is kosher, fit for use. So this salt is used to make meat fit for use. Amazing. So not only does salt preserve itself, it preserves others. It also makes meat edible for humans. Wow, salt is fantastic. Okay, what is salt? What is it? What's the secret of salt? So for this, I had to look in a different book called Likutei Torah. See, my dad, he's a Chabad rabbi. And if you've ever asked a rabbi a question, sometimes they ask you back a question or they just confuse you until you don't even know what they're talking about. I said to my dad, I was in 3rd grade, I said, why every Friday night you're dipping the challah in salt? Makes the kiddush, cuts the challah, dips it in salt. Why? Why are we dipping it in salt? So he answered me. In 3rd grade, I thought it was the answer. I only realized like last week that it wasn't the answer. He says, Shmuley, you know why? Because our home is like the temple. And the temple in Jerusalem, it says in the Torah, every time you bring a sacrifice, lo tashbis velach, you always have to have salt when you brought a sacrifice. Ah, okay, that's the answer. No, it's not the answer. Why does the temple want salt every time you bring a sacrifice? He just kicked the can down the road like a real professional rabbi. So I go to my dad. I say, why? Why in the temple? He says, I don't know. You got to look it up. So I looked it up in Likutei Torah. This is another book from the founder of Chabad, Rabbi Shneur Zalman. And he says People brought their sacrifices, a big bull. The wealthier you were, the bigger it was. You need a little humility when you bring a sacrifice to God. Remember, you're bringing his ox. He gave it to you. Just bringing it back to the temple. A little humility. You didn't raise yourself. You didn't put yourself through college. Relax, relax. So salt represents humility. It represents what he calls the secrets of the Torah, the inner parts of the Torah, the chassidut of the Torah, and the Torah itself preserve us. But here's the thing with salt and humility. Too much, and you don't take the job. No, give it. No, someone else take it. Too little, and you're obnoxious. You need just the right amount of humility. So when it comes now to pickle making, and we're using salt, which is humility, we need to get it right. So garlic, you love garlic, you don't have garlic, nobody cares. You dill, you don't have the dill, nobody cares. But your fermenting agent, your foundation is the kosher salt. So this is critical, so I'll speak slow as possible. If you do heaping, it's going to be too salty, unedible. If you do too little salt, then it's not going to ferment, and you just have a cucumber sitting in water. You need to get it just right. This is the art here. This is the big moment. 626, the big moment happening now. All over Europe, figuring out the exact amount of humility needed in kosher pickles. I'm going to shake it so it's leveled, and a drop below 1 tablespoon. Here comes the second tablespoon, second tablespoon, second tablespoon. I'm going to get it just so it's not heaping, okay? There we go. That's really the only part you have to listen during the whole thing. But it's also good to listen because we'll find out where the salt come from, all right? So we're going to have to dissolve the salt. Instead of using boiling water, then we're going to be cooking the pickles, canning. You don't want to do that. We want to use cold tap water, 2 tablespoons salt, and I'm just going to stir it until the salt is dissolved. While it's stirring, typically I sing Hava Nagila. It's an international Hava Nagila. Hava Nagila, Hava Nagila. Has not made it to Europe. This is an Israeli song from the 1940s, and it's actually an old Hasidic melody that, of course, wasn't an Israeli song. There was no Israel at the time. It was they just added tempo and lyrics, and there you go. Hava Nagila, Hava Nagila. See what a little tempo and lyrics could do, huh? Unbelievable. All right, looks like it's getting dissolved, which is good. Look at that. Now it is completely dissolved. We're ready to get into we call the spirituality of salt. Takes about 1 minute. I was doing exactly this for it was a camp, so a bunch of kids. And one kid said, you know, salt comes from the ocean, and God actually gave it to the ocean as a gift because it was upset about something. Well, what could the ocean be upset about? Well, if you look back to creation, there was just one water, just one group of guys, all equal. One of them becomes the firmament, and the other one became the lower waters, the ocean. I'm not saying that's what happened to me and Rabbi Land. He became the chief rabbi, and I'm not saying that would happen. But in life, sometimes there's winners and there's losers. So the ocean complains to God. They say, what? Why are we the lowly ocean and they're the firmament? Everybody looks up to the heavens to pray. So God says, I see you're brokenhearted. I'll give you a gift. I'll give you the gift of salt, and the temple will use your salt. That's a medrash. This is in our Jewish teachings. Think about it. That's the gift. I mean, there was a comedian, a Yiddish comedian on the radio in New York. He was the first one to go outside and talk to people in the streets, like these talk shows. He invented it, a Yiddish comedian. And his prize was a pound of salt. A Pfund von Salz. It's a joke. It's a comic thing. Who wants a pound of salt as a prize? Why would God give the ocean salt? But now we know something. Now we know that salt is strength. It never goes bad. It's humility. And people mistake humility for weakness. It's not. Look in the Torah. Who was super humble? Abraham. He says, I'm just dust and ashes. That sounds like a humble guy. But the next thing he does, he argues with the creator of heaven and earth. And he says, what's with this killing the city? Maybe there's 50, maybe there's 45, maybe there's 30. He's bargaining with the creator. That's chutzpah. That's not weakness. Where did he get that strength? From his humility, from saying he's dust and ashes. Once you realize that it's not you who is making the success, God is doing everything. You're the agent. You're lucky enough to be God's arms and legs in this world to make the world a kosher place, a holy place. Once you realize you have that humility, you're like kosher salt. You're unstoppable. You don't go bad. You don't have burnout because it's not you that's burning out. It's God who's doing everything. There's kosher salt. The strength is like Mount Sinai, a small mountain which represents humility. But the Rebbe says, don't forget, it's a mountain. It's unmovable. That's Jewish humility. It's a chutzpah because we know that we are like King David standing there with our slingshot. We know the enemy's bigger. We know Goliath is bigger. But he's not fighting us. This is God's war. This is God's plan. And we are just showing up to let God provide his blessings. So Jewish way of looking at humility is strength, not weakness. So we go to the ocean, and the ocean is brokenhearted. That generates the gift of humility. The gift of strength comes from our brokenness, not from our winnings of trophies. That's something we tell kids. Sometimes you'll win, sometimes you don't win, and you try to hide the things you don't win. You're not good at this. You have a talent in this. We'll only show the trophies. It's a mistake. Our brokenness, the things we're not so good at, that's where the money is. That's where God appreciates it. So I'll tell you one thing, and we'll close it out. This here is Glenlivet 15. Took them 15 years to make this. A friend of mine in California started this exact workshop with chocolate. He calls it the Kosher Chocolate Factory. What does he do? He melts a bunch of chocolate chips, puts them in a mold, puts them in the freezer for 5 minutes, and the kids have chocolate popsicles and they go home happy. The Kosher Pickle Factory doesn't take 15 years, but it takes 3 days. This is a 7-day pickle. We're pickling. It's going to take time. I told him, I realized we're doing the same thing on opposite sides. When you go to a restaurant, this was in Psychology Today. I don't know if they sell it there. You go to a restaurant, you're full. They bring out the dessert menu. You have room for dessert, always room for dessert. Why? There's 2 parts of the brain, one for salty foods, one for sweet foods. Why? Because we're created in the image of God. God also has this matamim. Isaac tells Esau in the Torah, Genesis, he says, bring for me the 2 types of foods that I like, because he's created in God's image. God likes our success, our rabbis, our righteous ones, the sweet one, but he also likes the struggle, the brokenness, the kosher pickle, things that we identify with as people. So what is the bulk of the meal? Kosher, salt, salty foods. That's why I always bring out the Macallan. I'm actually out of Macallan, so we're going to substitute it with Glenlivet to show us that things that take time, that's maturity. Sugar, kids, you go over to an apple tree, you eat it, you have sugar, you have energy right away. That's very childish. Maturity, a good hoppy beer, a good Macallan, a good kosher pickle, this takes time. This is the difficult phone call we need to make. That's the issue. All right, we're now ready for spice. We got our kosher salt, which is humility, which is the brokenness of us, like the ocean that generates this salt. We're going to put in 2 heaping tablespoons of pickling spice. A lot of people can't find pickling spice. They want to make their own. So what do? Coriander, bay leaves, peppercorns. I'm going to stir it also so we get that good brine going. This is our salty brine that's going to be used in making our pickles. That's it. No vinegar. Vinegar's brand new. They just started doing that 500 years ago. This is how they did it. Times of the Bible. All right, we have our brine ready to go. We're now up to making the pickles. We're in the last 5-7 minutes. Rabbi Lent, right? We're okay? We're okay on time?
All good, all good.
All good. All right. So if you're making pickles with me now, have a few backup, but don't try to squeeze in more than 4. We started this system. This is the common sense part. A lot of times people put in the pickle and it's floating and it doesn't fit. It took us like 16 years of rabbinical education to come up with this idea. Basically, we snap it in half and you put it in like that. This just makes it easier on everybody. It's just a real simple process. If you're using a big container, leave it full. If you're not, snap it in half, okay? So we got our 2 cups water, 2 tablespoons kosher salt, and we have 2 tablespoons heaping pickling spice. Good, I'm gonna put in 1 more and not overstuff it. Can you see this? Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so I used to hold it and put it in, and one rabbi, I forget which Chabad it was, he tells me, why don't you just get a little shtender and put it on? I said, thank you. So this is, we learn things from each other. It's just fantastic. Okay. So
Rabbi
here
Shmuel, you have a question come in here. What if you're dissolving the salt? What difference does it make which salt you're using?
Very, 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 very good question. This is a big question in the salt community. If you've ever met people who go to a restaurant with their own salt, they got the black salt, they got the pink salt, they got the kosher salt, so they claim, and also like the big cooking shows now became very popular, use kosher salt. So I think scientifically, they're all exactly the same. I'm not in on this argument, but the reason why we use kosher salt instead of table salt, first of all, the measurements will be different, but the original pickle makers, when they came to the US in the 20s, they were the butchers. So they had the kosher salt from koshering. Yeah.
Just want to point out that kosher salt, I know over here it's not called kosher salt, it's called grof salt, which means thick salt. I know in America, that's the term kosher salt. But in Europe, I think the term is called big piece. Over here, it's called grof.
Coarse salt.
Coarse salt, exactly.
Coarse?
Right. Coarse salt, but in America, it's called kosher salt, yes.
It actually says it here both as coarse and kosher. So the term here, kosher, is not specifically that a rabbi went down and checked that everything is kosher. It's just used in the koshering process, also called cooking salt. Yeah, very good, because it's coarser. One little tip, I just used it recently. I was making a cake for Shabbos, and I dropped an egg on the tile floor. Something I'm not embarrassed to say publicly to the entire Europe, okay? It happens. I drop an egg. Now, how do you clean up an egg when you drop it on your tile floor? You take your broom. Now your broom's got full of yoyos. You got shmatas going. You take your kosher salt. You spritz on the kosher salt. You wait 10 minutes. The salt absorbs all the moisture. You sweep it up like nothing happened. By the time your wife comes down, Shabbos is peaceful. You just need kosher salt always in the house. It's such a fantastic thing. Whenever I see kosher salt, it reminds me not only of humility, but just the idea that whenever I recite Psalms, it says, Berit Krusai Melach, there's a covenant of salt because salt is everlasting, doesn't have preservatives or iodine. Yeah, okay, yeah, so there is talk about it in the salt community. I cannot weigh in on it. That is not, I'm not ordained to talk about the salt, how it works exactly. But I would imagine it's a different ratio if you're just using regular salt. But it would work for adaptability, the fifth step. So we went to Boise, Idaho, which is right in the middle of America. Rabbi Lifshitz is there. We had 200 people show up. He told me 25 people are coming. I didn't have enough supplies. What do? Adaptability. We used regular salt. That's exactly true. Okay, we're now ready for the garlic.
Sorry, someone's commenting that kosher salt does not have preservatives or iodine.
Iodine, yeah, I saw that.
So
very good. It's just the idea that it's thicker and coarser. And the Talmud actually says that if you want to see God in this universe, you want to see fire and water coexisting together, look at salt. You know, it comes from the ocean, comes from the water, but the way the sun corrodes it, so you got to schlep out. There's a guy in Manhattan. He goes down to the ocean. He schleps barrels, lays it out in his backyard. And a while the sun absorbs the moisture, and now he's left with salt. That's why you call it a salary in Europe or a payee. Every 2 weeks you get your, what is it called?
Salary.
Your payee? Your money? No, salary. Salary comes from the word salt because they used to pay the soldiers either in gold or salt because it was the same price because they had no access to the ocean. So that's a random fact. We're now ready for chesnok, and we're in the last 3 minutes here. We use the word salary. Yeah, salary comes from salt because if you don't have salt, first of all, everybody knows you need water to live. You also need salt to live. But you can't make bread, challah, without salt. You ever go to a restaurant or a Shabbos, you're eating the chicken soup, something's missing. You can't put your finger on it. Salt. You're eating some chicken, something's missing. Salt. So you go to a restaurant, you don't say, give me the salt salad. No, you say, give me the vinegar salad, the mustard salad. Salt is the guy, you might identify with this. Salt is the guy who's super quiet, in the back, pushing everyone else to the front. Whoa, great avocado, great chicken soup. This is a great brisket. It's the salt that's doing it, takes no credit. That's humility. That's a good quality that kosher salt has. We're now ready for chesnok, garlic. I happen to peel these. You don't have to. I had extra time this morning because I thought it was later. Long story short, I had nothing to do, so I peeled the garlic. But you don't have to. I'm going to put in, this is a spectrum here. So if you love garlic, put in 5. You don't love garlic, put in 2. 3, I don't know, whatever you want. 1, 2, 3, this is up to you. This is the taste. I'm going to go with 5 because there's 5 steps to pickle making. Why not? 5 books of the Torah, 5 is a good number, all right? We have to get to Purim. Every pickle making is connected to the time that we're doing it. There's no such thing as divine providence only happening, to other people. It happens to us in our own life. Pickle making is involved with divine providence. So what is the divine providence? Pickle making coming up to Purim, what's going on? Well, we'll get to that. All right, our last step, and then we do pickle post up and we're done. All right, I'm going to take some fresh dill, right? You already have dry dill in the pickling spice. So this is really aromatic. This is non-essential, but it's aromatic. Whenever you do a mitzvah, you don't do the bare minimum. You gotta put a ribbon on it. You gotta enhance it. You gotta put a little dill on it. So I'm gonna put, 2 sprigs. Nobody cares. Put 3, put 1. You do whatever you want. This is literally up to you. These are decisions you yourself have to make. No one can make this decision for you. So I'm going to put here a nice sprig of dill right on top. Is this thing you still could see, right? But I'm not putting it in the brine. The brine is the environment that the pickles are created in. And whenever I look at the brine, I always think, what brine am I making? What environment one of the Rebbe's earliest books called Hayom Yom, he says, our job is to create an environment. When someone walks into our home, do they feel like they walk into a very warm Jewish home? Is there a mezuzah? Are there Jewish books? Is there a menorah somewhere? Is there a garager hanging around? What are they walking into? Our kids, are they walking into a very stressed, is dad very stressed? Everybody's stressed and everybody's, or they walk into a loving, there's guests and where you can't have guests, so we're packing it up and we give it. That's how we educate our kids. There's this environment. So whenever I make pickles, I think, what am I doing? Do my kids see me studying Torah? I always tell people a joke. This guy comes to the rabbi and he says, Rabbi, I want you to pray. I just had a son. I want you to pray he should grow up to be a guy who studies Torah and he prays every day. So the rabbi tells him, I could only do this. I could only give him a blessing that he'll come to me when he has a kid praying that his kid does the Torah prayer and study. If you yourself study every day, let your kids see it. I know the kids are on here. It's fine. Let them see you studying. Let them see you praying. They'll pick it up. Kids do what we do, not what we say. So we got to make sure that we're creating a brine in our own home for ourselves, for our spouse, for our family. That's really a beautiful kosher brine. All right, we're now ready for pickle post-op, and we're done. What exactly do we do now till these things are ready? All right, here we go. But first, about 6 years ago, Mo passed away. He was in his late 90s, early 90s, about 94. So my brother, God bless him, bought me a kosher pickle, which is a nice 4-foot, and we named it Mo. So every time we do a pickle workshop or we study a little Torah, we say a blessing, be nice to put the recipe in the chat. Okay, sure. We always say that the neshama of Mo should have an aliyah because he doesn't have anyone saying Kaddish for him. So every time we do a pickle workshop, we say Mo should have an aliyah. His soul should be blessed, and he in turn should bless us. Look at that. That is Mo. I used to travel. I used to go through TSA. I don't think I ever went to Europe with it, but we put it through the TSA. Whose is this? Come over here. I'm like, what? Like, we want to take a picture. So I have pictures of me and TSA guys. It's a very popular pickle. All right, we should do the blessing of the cucumber, and then we'll close it out. Is that good? I never understood till, I would say 2 months ago, the idea that the rabbis, well, in the Bible it says, after you eat and you're satisfied, then you should say a blessing. But the Bible doesn't say you have to say a blessing before you drink wine, only says after. The rabbis figured it out that you should do one before. I never understood why there's so many blessings. There's a blessing on a cucumber. There's a blessing on a banana. There's a blessing on chicken. What do they eat? Rabbi Lent, what do you eat at your kiddush over there on Shabbos? Challah, there's a blessing on challah, a blessing on wine, there's a blessing on everything. Until the recent unprecedented situation where I started working from home. So I go to my office, check my email, I go to the refrigerator, I have a little cucumber, I make a blessing. Then I go to the fridge, I get a little soda. All day I'm making blessings. God knew, how do I keep these humans in a totally connected way to God all day long? If I give them blessings to do before they have coffee, before they eat a pickle, they're going to be blessing God all day, especially if you work from home and the refrigerator is in walking distance. So this is actually such a wonderful thing. So let's do the blessing of the pickle, which is Bori Pri Adama, and then we'll close it out. Baruch atah Adino Eloheinu melech ha'olam, Bori Pri Adama. Wow, very good. They're even good before they start. All right, this is also very important what to do. I don't know the weather by you, I'm sure it's different. For 24 hours, needs to be out of the refrigerator. I would put it on a windowsill, uncovered. Remember, we're doing open barrel pickling. I have sun here, so I'm going to leave it over here in the sun. If you're very, very ambitious, you can put it outside like Mo, but I'm not at his level. Mo had the ability of putting in his finger and tasting it and telling me if it's a good brine or not. That I cannot do. So we just have to see how it comes out. So you put it in the sun for 24 hours. Okay, it's 6 p.m. by you, 7 p.m.?
Depends where. Here it's 6 p.m.
Okay.
7 p.m.
Okay, almost 7 p.m. So then tomorrow night around this time, you can put, if you're making sourdough, do you cover it? Very good. Yes. So only really to put it in the refrigerator do I want to cover it so no one knocks it over. We're really doing open barrel pickling. So sometimes I'll put like a cheesecloth and a rubber band, but if I know the kids are going to be schlepping the milk and they may knock it over, so then I'll put on the lid, nice and tight. That's up to you. But for the first 24 hours, it must be open. It must be open. It must be open. We'll say it 3 times and very slowly. It's winter here. I would suggest get on a plane and move to California. That's my one suggestion. Or Florida, it's winter, so put it in the sun. There's no sun in the winter there?
What is that the yellow thing in the sky?
Oh, yeah. Yes, exactly. Have you seen that lately?
Not for a long time.
Not for a long time.
So just room temperature, no? Or it needs to be warm?
What I could do, I don't always do this, but I could perform a miracle and have the sun come out for you. I mean, I'll have to do it. If I'm pushed against the wall, like Joshua kept the sun up, because his team was running behind schedule. He kept the sun out a little extra. I may have to do that for you. So Rabbi Pickle has that option. I'm going to bless your pickles that with the sun, without the sun, it's going to work. Why? Because our great-great-great-grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov, he quoted a Talmudic scholar who was so poor, and his daughter, they didn't have any olive oil in the house. It's so expensive. They had vinegar, which is so cheap. But she filled up the candles for Shabbat. Instead of using olive oil, she used vinegar, and she's crying. The dad, he was known for his poverty. He goes to his daughter, "What's happening?" She says, "Hey, we don't have olive oil." He said this line that was later quoted by the Baal Shem Tov, and it's such a great line. He said, "The God that makes olive oil burn could make vinegar burn." And this exactly happened later in, Poland and Ukraine. They had no candles. So he said, take some icicles. They took icicles, they lit them. The God who makes candles burn will make icicles burn. So we'll quote our forefathers and we'll say, the God who makes the sun help ferment pickles can also help room temperature make pickles. So we'll go with Rabbi Lent's room temperature in Ireland, okay? So with that, we conclude with a round of applause for Mo and everyone for joining together. Yidden joining together is already a joy, the month of Adar. So I want to really thank you guys. I see over here people are making it. Rabbi Lent, I'm so happy. Oh, Rabbi Kesselman is on. I didn't even see that. Look at that. Wow.
Maybe people, if they have the jars, they could show them. I think some of the people are making them. Oh, there we go. I see the pickles are arriving. Oh, wow.
Right, let me know if you have any questions, because I know people got to go. Oh, thank you from SK to everyone. Oh, I see on the bottom here.
Those pickles are looking great.
Pickles
very good. Who is that?
Trying to scroll through here. No pickles in Dublin, Estelle, no pickles?
The pickles is really a metaphor. When are pickles ready to eat? Okay, someone's listening. Thank you, Hannah. Okay. The way it works now is you have cucumbers in water, like this, in about 3 days. So 24 hours in the sun. I see we got derailed with no sun. 24 hours in the sun and then 2 days in the refrigerator. So it's a 3-day pickle, right? You're going to get it to a half sour. If you're happy with that, you take a taste, you say the blessing. Good for you. You leave it in, it's going to continue to ferment for about 2 weeks. And that's our basic window. Some people claim they had it and it was good for about a month, but I don't know how much salt they put in for that. I don't know what that story is. But we say between 2-3 weeks, you're fine. So 3-day pickle, it should be ready for your taste. If you taste it and it's too much salt, you spit it out, which is possible. Then you go to step number 2, Joshua, persistence, consistency. You start again. If it tastes like water, if it just tastes like cucumbers and water after 3 days, I think the miracle of the sun may not have occurred. Put it back out of the fridge to jumpstart the fermentation process. That's the one thing I would say, just as a backup to our miracle powers here. A backup would be if they, after 3 days, are not fermenting, take them out of the refrigerator, put them back room temperature for another 24 hours, and then we'll be on the way. So there we go. We got 24 hours in the sun, 2 days in the fridge. It's a 3-day pickle. Thank you. So interesting. Oh, thank you. I don't know. Tikva. Very nice. Okay, Rabbi Lent, I want to thank you personally for hosting it, and Rabbi Lowenthal for his comments regarding kosher and coarse salt.
We have a whole team of people hosting it in communities, and it's been really fascinating, interactive, and I'm sure everybody enjoyed it as much as I did. Unfortunately, I don't have my pickles here to be able to make them, but I will get the ingredients and try the recipe. I think we have to finish with the famous pickle story. The little old lady goes into the pickle shop. I thought you were going to say this one. She goes into the pickle shop and she says, she points at the barrel and she says, "How much is a pickle?" And the guy in New York, he says, "A pickle is a nickel." So she doesn't want to pay a nickel, so she picks a really small one. She says, "And how much is a pickle?" He says, "A pickle is a nickel." So
yeah, that's good. That is a good one. I don't know, that should be part of the workshop. Do we have 30 seconds for the Purim pickle connection? And then we'll close it out.
Sure.
30 seconds. It's worth it. The pickle connection to Purim is very simple and straightforward. Purim is about this evil Haman who comes from Amalek, who comes from the people that try to cool us off from being Jewish. And he's defeated by a man named Mordechai the Jew. It wasn't his last name, but people just called him the Jew. Something about Yehudi, Mordechai HaYehudi, that is the remedy for this terrible illness called Amalek and Haman. So if you have an Amalek and Haman in your life, or you've come to discover this issue, Amalek is the enemy of the Jew because he gets into your head. He doesn't shoot arrows from over the fence. He gets into your head. He's the worst, most dangerous enemy. The only way to combat him is Mordechai HaYehudi. Yehudi means to admit. It comes from the word of thanks. Leah, when she named her son Judah, she said, "Hapam oide es Hashem." Now I will thank God. So this idea of thanking, admitting, it's a humility. So kosher salt, perhaps, is the perfect antidote to this horrible disease of Haman. So let our kosher pickles be ready for Purim, that when we eat them at our Purim Seudah, at our Purim meal, Purim, we got to hear the Megillah, we got to give gifts of food, we got to give gifts to the poor, and we have to have a feast. This year's on Friday, so you got to do it early. You have your pickles at the feast, you have in mind, may this salt keep away any Hamanic thoughts, any Amalek cooling thoughts, and let us be passionate about our Judaism and each other. And let us say, Amen.